Thank you so much. Also, welcome from my end. It's wonderful to see you all here. Also, welcome to our digital visitors. And thanks to this amazing team pulling this together. My name is Katrin Kaeufer. I'm originally from Germany, but the last 25 years I've lived in the US. I did my PhD actually on values-based banking, and nobody was interested in that. So I changed the field and went into leadership, organizational learning at MIT, and then at one point I started to combine these two fields. And the next 15 minutes, I would like to share a few observations from my end and hope to spark our conversation with that, if that's okay with all of you. So I would like to start off with a quote, and this quote is from one of the people that really inspired me. Her name is Tamara Froman. She was the CEO of City Credit Union, the largest credit union in Canada for about 15 years. And when she arrived as a CEO, she realized although the credit union had this mission, the DNA of serving the community, serving the neighborhood, serving their members, that over time they actually lost the connection to that. And that's very typical for financial institutions, because the power of money and the power of focusing on one number, profitability, is so big that mission and values really require an anchoring in the organization. At one point I asked her, why are you doing this work? And she said, and I think this is a sentence that really unites all of us, the allocation of capital is one of the strongest determinants of our future. The allocation of capital is one of our strongest determinants of future. So what all of us are doing matters. And who gets a loan, who gets equity, writes the story of our collective future. And with that, I would like to jump to my first observation, which I call the end of the neutrality paradigm. So some of you might have seen 2 years ago the Business Roundtable in the US, which is the largest association of the largest businesses in the US, stated that they changed their focus as an organization, and they really feel that it was important for them to be very explicit. The purpose of a business is not just shareholder value, but to move towards stakeholder value. And immediately, some of you might have seen that, the economists responded and said, this is not the purpose of business, this is not the purpose of a corporation. A corporation has to be neutral. CEOs are not elected. Our government needs to direct society. And I think this is a really interesting discussion, but the discussion ended via action. So today we see in Europe businesses pulling out of Russia. In the US, you see businesses taking a clear stand on voting rights. Globally, you see businesses taking a very clear stand on climate change. So something has changed, and we are part of that. And this leads me to a second observation. This is not new. So we all stand on the shoulders of a movement. In the 70s, 80s, the social responsible investment movement, the divestment movement regarding, the apartheid system in Africa, microfinance, 70s, 80s, saw a lot of bottom-up innovations in the field of finance. And then the beginning of 2000, the ESGs through the UN, and then 2007, something that has already formed. This movement of impact investors became much more visible through the conference that Rockefeller started, the Impact Investment Conference. So why is that? Why has there always been an attempt to balance impact and finance? And I think this has to do with the object of what we are working with, money. So money is this unbelievable innovation, which is just based on the fact that we all believe in it. It's a social construct. And as amazing it is, at the same time, it has a shadow. And part of the shadow is that money translates value into a price. So what does that mean? So I value a human life, I value a tree, and money allows us to put this into the market. And there's another shadow, which is money is too efficient for us. So we humans are not as fast as money. If I sell, a chair, if I sell vegetables, I always compete with an object that's money, that's fast and inefficient. So these two reasons, and there are many more, but I think these are two core reasons why our work is sometimes hard. And I would like to look at a field that I've been involved with in the last 10 years, innovators at the margin of this field of impact investment and values-based finance. So the last 10 years I've worked with the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, and we try to create a movement of banks that use finance as a tool for social change. And I think, as small as these organizations are, there is power in innovation at the margin, and I just wanted to share very briefly a few learnings from my work with them. And the learnings that I would like to share today are around which strategy for creating impact are these innovators in the field are using. So the first innovation, I think, is not revolutionary, but important to notice. Are you, as a financial institution, use impact just in isolated projects at the margin of your organization, or is it core to your business model? This is an important question to ask because this completely changes your relationship with your client. It also changes how you innovate a product. Are you innovating out of the perspective of those that you feel need help? Are you innovating also out of the question, what does society need? Or are you just focusing on profit? So that's an important difference. And it also changes your relationship to your clients. So one example, most of you probably know Triodos Bank in Europe. They have an app where they publish all their business loans. And by doing so, you can just go to Madrid, you can go to Vienna, you can go to Amsterdam. You open the app and you see the network of organizations that are financed by this bank. You have 100% transparency, and at the same time, you create a network of people who want transformation. Another example, and I call this level 3 of how to create impact or impact strategy, is a more system perspective. It basically asked, where are leverage points for me to change? So one very simple example, GLS Bank in Berlin. In Berlin, you have the River Spree, you have a lot of tourist boats on there, and they decided to finance the one business that offers solar boats in order to change or disrupt the market. So disruption of market. You look at the system, and disruption of market is your perspective. And then the final perspective I would like to pull out here, and I think this is where we are heading, I call ecosystem innovation. And here an example from Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, the coldest capital in the world, 40 degrees Celsius minus. They have a large population living in these white girts that you see on the slide. And their issue is that these are low-income customers who can't afford upgrading the heating system. And what Bank did is to bring different stakeholders to the table and to create a solution that is only possible by all of them working together. And I see this as a new trend or as a development that I think will impact our future. I see this also in other banks, for example, flood prevention, financial products, where you bring municipalities, homeowners, and financial institutions together. So that's a fourth strategy that I would like to pull out. So what do we see in these innovations and changes? What we see is what's happening is a move towards a systems perspective. And a systems perspective means that I'm not just measuring my impact by comparing my CO2 emission between today and last year. System perspective is to benchmark what I'm doing against the social and ecological goals that I have. And coming back to the beginning, when I talked about, we are seeing the end of the neutrality paradigm. In a recent study in 2020 in G20 countries, which make up 60% of our population, 80% of our GDP, 3 out of 4 citizens said they want their government to transform their economy towards a socially fair and sustainable economy. So this is where we are today. There is a movement again. And I believe the impact investment movement is mirroring this. And our role is now to respond to this. I think this will mean that we have to differentiate. So it's not just one movement. There are a lot of different angles in this. And we have to understand how to measure or benchmark our impact against a system perspective. But this is not all. I think the core leverage point, and we saw this in the rate of Deutsche Bank yesterday in regard to their green impact investments. The biggest leverage is the intention that every banker, that every investor brings into the work that they are doing. We can develop all the impact variables in the world. They can all be manipulated. At the end of the day, it's about what intention and what perspective do I bring into my work. In that regard, I think this is an important time to be together, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for opening us up, Katrin. I think it's beautiful that you just ended on the note of intention. And I feel like specifically when we talk about impact, also a lot of us may sometimes feel like, is what we're doing enough? Like, am I setting enough steps? Am I doing enough? Do you also still have that feeling at some points, or do you feel like you're on the right path with your personal intention and your steps?
I think what you are pointing at is the biggest challenge that we face as society, and it's reflected in this high number of depression and mental breakdowns that we see. How do I stay action confident in the face of these massive disruption that we are facing? And the image that I use is every seed starts small. So whether it's a tree or whether it's a tulip, the seed, but it has a potential. And to understand this potential, we can only ask ourselves. We are the benchmark for our action. And for me personally, I'm currently with the Presencing Institute working on something that we call the U School for Transformation, where we are trying to create spaces in society where we can collectively articulate a vision of our future. I think the biggest challenge we face is, with social media, there's such a negativity and such a, downward spiral collectively, all these divides. But when you look at the numbers, people think differently. So I feel our democracies will only survive if we create these spaces where we can collectively articulate the vision. Where do we want to go? And I think this space is an example.
Thank you so much for sharing your vision, for definitely also bringing some seeds to this place. Thank you so much, Katrin Kaeufer.